INEOS took charge of Manchester United with promises of change, ambition, and getting the club back to the top. But 1 year in, has it been progress or just pure chaos? In this video, we're breaking down Sir Jim's first year in charge, every key decision from transfers to ruthless sackings, from budget cuts to squad reactions. Some believe that INEOS are building for the future, others believe that INEOS haven't really done all that much. This is what former United player Paul Scholes had to say. They have been in charge of Manchester United for nearly a year now, and everything is still negative. I can't think of something positive that they've done for the football club. INEOS, led by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, became co-owners of Manchester United in February 2024, with the announcement reading, Sir Jim Ratcliffe's acquisition of a 25% stake in United will be announced today. INEOS Sport will take control of the football side of the club. Promising statements were coming out from credible sources on INEOS's high expectations when joining United, with The Athletic reporting, a person who met INEOS, success and prestige, not money, setting the standard where you have to compete for the title and the final stages of the Champions League every year. It's not about settling for fourth place. It was so refreshing. However, it was mentioned very early on that INEOS were looking to make drastic changes, as reported by Samuel Luckhurst. There are suggestions that the changes INEOS will make at United could be brutal. The players appeared to be excited under the new owners, with Harry Maguire quick to back INEOS and their message. The guys came away from the meeting impressed, everyone is motivated and wants to fight for the badge, for this club, and to be there for this new story. It's an exciting time for the club. Sir Jim, when asked what INEOS stood for and what they would bring to the club, said, "We have 3 words that we use in INEOS, which I think encapsulate INEOS really well, which is grit, rigour, and humour." I think that a lot of that applies to football, you know? Grit and rigour, potentially. Humour, absolutely, as you'll see in the remainder of this video. Humour definitely follows Sir Jim around. The stage was set for Sir Jim and INEOS to do as they pleased, with essentially full control over footballing operations, and first on that list was bringing in a new CEO. One of the first moves that INEOS made when being announced as new co-owners of Manchester United was signing our new CEO, Omar Barada, which sent shockwaves in the footballing world. Considered one of the most experienced footballing executives in European football, this was a big win for Manchester United, especially given the previous 2 CEOs, Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold, left much to be desired. With a lot of Manchester United fans screaming out for footballing people to run our operations rather than financial people, along with the signing of Jason Wilcox on face value, this was something new. The first approach to Omar Barada was made by INEOS's Sir Dave Brailsford in December. A meeting followed with Sir Jim Ratcliffe before a summit involving the Glazers. The signing of Barada, once seen as the successor to current Manchester City CEO, really shocked United fans in a good way. It showed that INEOS was serious about getting the best in class, and we got our man, with the cherry on the sundae being we were taking him from our City rivals. Next was a sporting director. Manchester United wanted Dan Ashworth, but Newcastle wouldn't quite let him go without a fight. Before INEOS were even announced as owners, we were linked to Dan Ashworth, with David Ornstein reporting, INEOS really likes Dan Ashworth, but there has been no approach so far. If he wants to leave and if Newcastle are open to a departure, they will have to negotiate. INEOS is willing to pay whatever it takes to get the right people in certain key positions. The irony of pay whatever it takes to get the right people in certain key positions, now we know how Ashworth's time at United ended, is quite painful, but it gets worse. Here's what Fabrizio Romano had to say about INEOS's pursuit for Dan Ashworth. United and INEOS want Dan Ashworth to be the face of the new project. There was literally no doubt in their minds that Dan Ashworth was their man. Dan Ashworth obviously wanted to leave Newcastle to become United's inaugural sporting director. The INEOS group are so confident of prizing him from Newcastle, and they have not sounded out alternatives for the post, as he is their only target. Looking back on these reports, the sacking of Dan Ashworth looks even worse. Ashworth was INEOS's only target. They weren't even considering anyone else, and it turned sour so quickly. Just a reminder, Ashworth's position still hasn't been replaced since he's been sacked. Maybe that's because we literally didn't have an alternative before hiring him, so we have absolutely no clue who to replace him with. But having brought Ashworth in, the structure looked fairly solid. I mean, we had Jason Wilcox as technical director, we had Dan Ashworth as sporting director, Christopher Vival as the director of recruitment, and looking over all of them, Omar Barada as the CEO. Dan Ashworth was literally the heart of the structure, and he lasted about 5 months. Either way you look at it, INEOS messed up massively, and a year into your reign, you want to provide confidence to the fans, not this. What went wrong with Ashworth though? Well, upon his arrival, it was reported that United were changing their recruitment policy. INEOS aimed to sign players for the club rather than the manager to ensure that they are future-proofed to fit in, irrespective of who leads the team on a daily basis. INEOS are keen to hand responsibility for recruitment to dedicated staff led by incoming sporting director Dan Ashworth, technical director Jason Wilcox, chief scout Steve Brown, and director of football negotiations Matt Hargreaves. This meant we were going away from the then manager Erik ten Hag having the final say, but rather Ashworth being the man with the final decision over the players we would sign. However, as reported by Mark Ogden, there appeared to have been some miscommunication from Ashworth, where he didn't stick to the original plan, buckling on the signing of Matthijs de Ligt. We can hypothesize why Dan Ashworth didn't work out and what actions led to his departure until the cows come home, but in reality, as reported by David Ornstein, it all came down to his relationship with the new owners. Dan Ashworth's appointment came more from the INEOS side. The fundamental part was that Sir Jim Ratcliffe didn't get on with Dan Ashworth. He didn't rate him to the extent he thought he would. What can we take from the Dan Ashworth saga? INEOS, if they believe something isn't working, will be brutal and fix it. They will not mince their words or actions. They're very to the point and they don't care about public opinion. Now, this can be a very good attribute to have as new owners because it will mean that they are willing to make the difficult decisions that the Glazers just wouldn't do in fear of public reaction. However, it can also mean they're more open to making mistakes, and when they make these mistakes, they will be very public. Shown by the fact that they were 100% certain Ashworth was the right man. They were going back and forth with Newcastle for months for him. They wanted him to be the face of the project, but instead, he became the ass of the project. Let's talk about transfers. Have INEOS improved United's recruitment, or just continued the same old mistakes? I'm not going to go into too much detail on transfers because I have already rated our January transfer window, link in the description for more in-depth analysis over there. But trends we can visibly see are that there's yet to be a player signed for over £52.2 million. Our most expensive signing is a 19-year-old supposed generational talent, which shows two things. One, we're focusing on youth. Two, we're moving away from big money signings. This was also reported a month prior to INEOS beginning at United. INEOS want to not necessarily sign Galacticos and big names, but exciting and dynamic players. They want to combine this with strong leadership that has vision and purpose from the managers and captains. Everything they said was very exciting. Recruitment was always important to INEOS. Recruitment is INEOS's number one priority with the rebuild of the stadium secondary. They want to find a better balance to recruitment than what has been achieved over the past and have identified Ashworth as the ideal lead to a new recruitment team. Again, with Ashworth at the heart of it, oh lord. And it's easy to see how Yoro aligned with INEOS's plans, with young and dynamic being the key words here. United's interest in Lenny Yoro predates INEOS taking sporting control of the club in February, but his profile, young, dynamic and promising, aligns with new long-term planning. There have been multiple reports to back the fact that INEOS want to lean towards developing younger talents as well. For example, during more than an hour with the academy, two key messages were broadcasted. INEOS wanted United to be the best everywhere. Secondly, INEOS insisted that they are committed to the idea that the academy will continue to strengthen the first team. INEOS really want to build something for the future in terms of signing talents like Chido Obi and Sekou Kone. United are already working on more signings like this, not to mention the backing of youngsters already in the squad. United believe that they have a fantastic player in Garnacho who still has a lot of room for improvement and huge potential. INEOS view him and Kobe Mainu as crucial parts of the club's long-term project. In their first transfer window last summer, despite spending £185 million, INEOS's hands were relatively tied. United's £555 million spend over the previous three summer transfer windows coupled with their struggles to raise meaningful funds through sales, have left Ratcliffe and his INEOS team with little financial headroom as they gear up for their first summer in charge. However, it's clear to see that INEOS don't want to be in the same position this summer. By carrying out some quite clever business in the January transfer window, which included loaning Marcus Rashford, Malacia and Anthony, not to mention selling Jadon Sancho in the summer window on a loan with obligation to buy. Although not having the players in our squad may mean pain in the present moment, should we move these players on, it should give us more money to play with in the summer. Marcus Rashford's situation is particularly interesting. Despite his lack of form, there are other financial reasons to get him out of the club. For example, once Berardi was announced, it was reported he would be tasked with keeping basic salaries below a $300,000 a week ceiling, although INEOS understand there may be circumstances that require more flexibility. Is it a coincidence that as soon as INEOS's first appointed manager comes in, Marcus Rashford, the club's highest earner, was left out of the squad? Andy Mitten personally doesn't think so. No, I think the manager has had a big say here. I think he's doing it his way. Ruben Amorim is a smiling assassin. He's a disciplinarian. But if I put my tinfoil hat on here, I think the writing was always on the wall for Rashford when Amorim came in. Anthony's situation is again an interesting one. INEOS's first assessment of the player was INEOS regard Anthony as a very talented player despite a bad season. I don't think it's a coincidence that Anthony is the only player who was loaned out and a buy option wasn't put in his contract. INEOS knew he was a talented player and perhaps he could shine somewhere else. So why put a ceiling on the amount of money you could bring in for him? Again, a great bit of business. On the downside, it's also been reported about 1,000 times that Casemiro, another player on ridiculous wages, is no longer wanted at the club. INEOS want to sell him, yet he's still here. So despite INEOS massively improving in recruitment and on the transfer market in comparison to the old regime, they do still have areas of improvement, which is why this summer will tell us so much about what the future of Manchester United is really going to be like. The last two windows have been good starters, but we're ready for the main course. Let's see what INEOS can cook us up. Let me know your thoughts on INEOS's first two transfer windows in the comments below. Now, moving on to one of the biggest decisions of their first year, sacking Erik ten Hag. Coming to the end of the 23-24 season, the United fan base was torn on whether to keep ten Hag. He had won a trophy in his first season and guaranteed Champions League football. However, in his second season, where we were plagued with injuries, we were knocked out of all competitions barring the FA Cup, and we were severely underperforming in the league. Despite ten Hag's apparent confidence, reports were coming out that he wanted INEOS to come out and support him to secure his position and respect within the squad, as reported here. Sources close to Erik ten Hag believe he will walk out at the end of the season if he doesn't get assurances from Sir Jim Ratcliffe's INEOS group about their commitment to him. It was even more apparent why ten Hag would want this, given the fact that there were whispers he was beginning to lose the dressing room, as you can see here. Erik ten Hag still has the support of the United dressing room, despite some complaints over the intensity of his training regime. However, many in the United squad believe it is likely INEOS will make a change at the end of the season. Even legends of the club were publicly coming out and claiming that INEOS had already made up their mind. Paul Scholes on Erik ten Hag's future. I think INEOS have already made up their mind. I don't think he'll be there next season. I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking for a new manager now. Ten Hag obviously then went on to win the FA Cup final, and it put INEOS in quite a tricky situation. At the time it was reported, INEOS knew they risked a backlash from supporters if they sacked Erik ten Hag, and long story short, INEOS decided to keep ten Hag in charge even after the abysmal league performances and decided to back him, which they would now have to do as he had already made it apparent he would walk if they didn't. This resulted in ten Hag's contract being extended an extra year, which, following the FA Cup final win, from the outside looked like the right move in all fairness. Former players like Gary Neville also agreed. Here's what he had to say. The manager market this summer has been quite difficult for a number of top clubs in Europe. I'm happy that they've continued and maintained that stability into next season. However, at that point, INEOS had already spoken about the manager role with everyone and anyone who put themselves forward, resulting in ten Hag having to come out with a statement like this. INEOS took their time, they are new in football, it's normal to reflect the season. It's no secret that they talked with multiple candidates. This indirectly put ten Hag in a position of weakness with the squad, knowing knowing that if results didn't go his way this season, then he was on very thin ice. And as Varane has now officially confirmed, the relationship with Ten Hag and the squad was almost non-existent, meaning in reality, they knew if things didn't go their way, he would be gone, resulting in INEOS having to pay a pretty penny to Ten Hag, given they had just activated a contract extension a few months prior. Erik Ten Hag was due around £17 million in compensation following his sacking, as per Samuel Luckhurst. Was it justified, or should INEOS have backed him? Especially given how we're performing now in the season, INEOS realistically, if they wanted to give Ten Hag a position of strength, they should not have been shopping around further managers in the summer. From the beginning of this saga on keeping Ten Hag or getting rid of him, they should have picked a side and gone all out with it. Instead, it appears there was some hesitancy in the decision making, and ultimately that hesitancy is why I believe Dan Ashworth lost his job. Either way, not INEOS's finest hour. In comes Ruben Amorim, a young and exciting manager, but is he the right fit for United? There's no doubt that he wants the best for the club. When describing his dream, here's what he had to say. It's simple. It's to win the Premier League. I want to help this club. I feel a great connection with everyone here. My dream is to win the Premier League in our stadium with our fans after so many years and problems. It's the most beautiful goal. However, ever since the start, along with the hype of his arrival, there have been question marks. Some being, why bring a manager in mid-season who's going to play a completely different style of play to what the players are used to? We all knew before Amorim's arrival that he was going to opt for the 3-4-3 formation, despite the fact that the formation doesn't include typical wingers, which is the area that we are arguably most stacked. Not to mention the cost of bringing in Amorim mid-season and having to compensate Sporting, along with paying Ten Hag's exit fee, has reportedly cost the club over £30 million. Would it have been more cost effective and beneficial on the pitch to, say, stick with Van Nistelrooy until the end of the season? During his short-term stint as interim manager, Ruud was undefeated in his 4 games, winning 3, drawing 1, scoring 11 goals and conceding 3. Now, obviously, we do have to bear in mind that he wasn't exactly facing the toughest of opposition during his stint, but we could actually see smiles on the players' faces again. But when I look at how Leicester, who are now under Van Nistelrooy, are doing, I begin to think maybe he wouldn't have turned our season around anyway. The sentiment is very clear with why we brought Amorim in mid-season. Short-term pain, long-term gain. Why wait until the summer where he would have to give all these players opportunities next season before making a decision on their futures? Instead, he's come in, he's trying different players in different positions using his system, and he's filtering out players that will be a part of his future squad. At the same time, with the context of he came in mid-season, this entire season is pretty much a Hail Mary for him to do whatever he wants in order to gather data for long-term success. Although it's probably the toughest time to be a United fan for about 30 plus years, I'm of the belief that sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. Think of it this way. Imagine Manchester United have been an alcoholic for the past 15 years, and we've gone to see different therapists to help us stop drinking, but our parents, in this case the Glazers, would say to the therapists, in this case managers, hey, you can't just get them to stop drinking altogether, otherwise they're not going to be able to cope. So the therapist says to them, okay, we'll help United, but we'll take them off slowly. They'll still be allowed a tin every night, and we'll work around that, which is all rosy for the first 2 years of seeing the therapist. United think they're improving. They're not drinking as much until it comes to the 3rd year, where the therapist tells United, okay, now you're going to stop drinking completely, and you're going to do it my way. This is where United have a complete meltdown and fall off of a cliff. They can't cope without the alcohol, and they spiral. So the Glazers get rid of the therapist and get a new one who says the exact same thing, and the cycle repeats. The reason Amorim coming in is so refreshing is because he's not giving United a couple of tins every night to cope, just so we see immediate results. He's making those mother fudgers go cold turkey, something which no United manager has been allowed to do. You look at Ten Hag, who came in with his own philosophy, but had to adapt it to the players. You look at Jose, who came out exposing the players, but ended up getting the sack for it. We needed this change. Yes, it's painful to watch. Yes, we're one of the biggest laughingstocks in world football right now. But Amorim needs to do this to, not to quote Donald Trump, drain the swamp. Amorim could have easily kept Marcus Rashford as an option until the end of the season, despite him not putting everything in training. But no, he told him to train harder or get going, because it leaves a bad impression on the rest of the squad, especially the youth, if he doesn't train properly. And with the backing of INEOS, Rashford is playing at Aston Villa right now. The question is, was it the right call to bring Amorim in mid-season? Honestly, even though this is the worst United team I've ever seen, I actually believe it was the right decision to bring him in. I love the mindset of short-term pain for long-term gain. And there's a method to Amorim's madness. There's a reason he's rotating so much. He's systematically working out who's got a future here and who hasn't. This one had fans furious, cutting Sir Alex Ferguson's contract. But was this just business or a lack of respect for a club legend? Now, this one, again, you can see from two sides. One side is Sir Alex is getting to the age where will he truly be able to fulfill an ambassador contract? Most likely not. So in reality, from a business perspective, the club are forking out 2.16 million a year for something that most likely wasn't bringing in a return. But then you look at it from a reality perspective of Manchester United would not be where they are today without Sir Alex Ferguson. I mean, if there's one person who deserves to be paid for life by the club, it's him. I'm very much on the same page with Eric Cantona, who had this to say. So Alex Ferguson should be able to do anything he wants at the club until the day he dies. Such a lack of respect, it's totally scandalous. So Alex Ferguson will be my boss forever, and I throw them all in a big bag of shiz. Looking at how INEOS have approached Sir Alex during their first year in charge is actually quite interesting. To begin with, it was reported that they would really tap into his expertise, with Laurie Whitwell reporting. David Gill became closer to United when Ed Woodward left and is expected to be tapped into by the incoming INEOS regime. Brailsford also feels Sir Alex Ferguson was always ahead of the curve and very innovative, and that tapping into his wisdom now will be important, not for cutting and pasting old practices, but for understanding the landscape of the club currently and applying guiding principles to reach new solutions. However, only yesterday, a report came out that this may no longer be the case. So Dave Brailsford and his cohorts are sick of hearing about how Manchester United dominated the Premier League for 2 decades under Sir Alex Ferguson. Brailsford feels the achievements of the past are weighing heavily on how United now go about the business of bringing back the glory. Personally, I'm not too angry at the approach INEOS are now taking. If you look at the past too much, you get stuck there, and the constant references to how Sir Alex ran the club, something which is never going to be replicated, is not helping the new wave of players and managers, in my opinion. Obviously, it's a good tool for inspiration, but no manager will ever be able to fill Sir Alex's shoes. So focusing on someone who is 100 times the manager you will ever be isn't exactly healthy. It didn't stop with Sir Alex though. The staff clearly haven't been the biggest fans, as reported. United staff have been left dismayed by a decision taken by INEOS, the club's new owners, to cancel the traditional perks for the FA Cup final. Not to mention the working culture around the club has completely changed. Sir Jim Ratcliffe told staff meeting yesterday he wants to end the club's work from home culture and staff must return to offices full time. This is part of INEOS's shock therapy to reboot culture at Old Trafford and London offices. Now, I don't know what your view on work from home culture is, but there's no doubt that the efficiency of working from home is highly debated. However, one of the main advantages of working from home is that you don't have to spend unnecessary time travelling to an office, which means more time with family and boosting overall job satisfaction. Something that Sir Jim has shown he doesn't give a shiz about. This was further demonstrated with the United end of season party. The United end of season party was actually cancelled by INEOS to save money rather than the club line, instead focusing on the FA Cup final. Literally anywhere they can, they're saving money, even if it's switching United's healthcare program. INEOS are switching United's healthcare program from Bupa to Vitality as part of their cost-cutting exercise. Although sources say the level of provision for staff will remain the same. Even if it's reducing funding to the Manchester United Foundation, INEOS are reducing United's funding to the Manchester United Foundation. Sources say that significant support for the foundation will still continue. You might be wondering what the Manchester United Foundation does. The Manchester United Foundation helps young people in Greater Manchester and beyond to achieve their goals. Their work focuses on education, community outreach, and disability support. Again, if you're looking to get people on side, I don't know if cutting funding to a foundation designed to support kids with disabilities is the way to go, but that's just me. These relentless cuts have obviously caused some uproar within the club, with United staff now believing they are paying the price for INEOS's mistakes. Manchester United staff argue that botched INEOS decision-making with regards to Eric Ten Hag and Dan Ashworth, as well as a questionable £200 million summer transfer spend, has left ordinary workers at risk of unemployment. Because this is the thing, you can make the argument that you're making hard decisions for the best interest of the club. However, you can only really make that if you're flawless in how you yourself operate. You can't say you're doing what's best for the club, meanwhile you're blowing millions on having Ashworth in the office for the length of the Euros. But unfortunately for ordinary United staff members, it doesn't look like things are going to be changing anytime soon. With it being reported only 2 weeks ago, more redundancies are on their way. Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS are planning on making more than 100 further redundancies at Manchester United. One of the most notable case studies of the endless cost-cutting, other than Sir Alex Ferguson himself, was Jackie Kay, a long-serving member at the club who worked her way up to head of team operations. Manchester United staff have been left stunned by the brutal dismissal of the club's long-serving head of team operations, Jackie Kay, as part of the ongoing restructuring by INEOS at Old Trafford. Kay, from a Manchester United sporting family, has worked at the club since 1995, initially as executive assistant to David Gill, before taking charge of first team logistics for more than a decade at Carrington. She was promoted to head of team operations in October 2023. Ashley Young even went as far as to label Jackie Kay the mum of Carrington. Here's what he had to say. Jackie Kay, she's just brilliant. She's like the mum to everyone. If there are any problems or there is anything we need sorting out, it's a case of, Jackie, can you do this? Jackie, can you help with this? I'm sure there are times when she looks at her phone when it's ringing and she must think, no, I'm not answering, but she's always there for you. Now again, you have to be sensitive with these topics because it's people's livelihoods. The people affected by these decisions aren't multi-millionaire footballers or managers. They're folk who have to pay their bills every month and provide for their families. Having said that, to play devil's advocate, we've known for years that the Manchester United squad has been bloated and underperforming. Would it come as a shock to anyone if within the club other areas are bloated and underperforming? To be one of the best clubs in the world, we need to be streamlined in all areas, not just on the pitch. And it would appear Sir Jim is trying to create a best-in-class environment. In order to do this, everyone can't be invited. But speaking about not being invited, cancelling the Christmas party? United have cancelled their funded Christmas party. Club staff have been left disappointed. This comes amid growing tensions after recent internal changes. Come on, Jim. How's Fred the Red going to put forward awkward, unwanted advances towards Zara Connolly while blaming it on the alcohol now? We've spoken about the office staff, we've spoken about the men's team, but what about INEOS's impact on the women's team? I'm not going to pretend that I'm clued up on women's football. I'm not. If you are, that's great for you. I hope you enjoy it. But what I wouldn't do is what Sir Jim, co-owner of Manchester United, has done. It was announced upon completion of INEOS joining Manchester United that they would take control of both men's and women's football operations. INEOS will take control of men's and women's football operations, as well as the academies. A new director of football will be appointed to oversee a transformation of recruitment. Sir Jim appointed Dan Ashworth, who made it apparent that the development of the women's team was on his agenda. Sir Jim even congratulated the women's team on their FA Cup triumph, saying the following: "Congratulations to the United women's team on lifting the FA Cup today. A proud and historic moment for the team that is a testament to their grit, determination, and team spirit. A wonderful achievement. Many congratulations." I mean, the words probably fell on deaf ears given that their funding was cut for the FA Cup final, leading to Fernandes and Heaton saving the day, as reported by The Telegraph. Manchester United women's players had only been given a small ticket allocation for friends and family at Wembley for the 2024 Women's FA Cup final. When Bruno Fernandes and Tom Heaton heard about it, they intervened and covered the cost of additional tickets using dressing room fine money. But either way, it's a nice thing for your co-owner to come out and congratulate you on your success. But then the cracks began to show. Sources indicate that some of the language Sir Jim Ratcliffe used to discuss United's women's team has been dimly received. Not to mention the man Sir Jim hired, who was saying he would revamp the women's team, was sacked just months later. United's women's team have been left deflated by Dan Ashworth's shock exit. Ashworth considered the development of the women's team to be an important part of his big picture rebuilding plans. But the cherry on the cake has to be this. During a tour of Carrington, Sir Jim Ratcliffe asked women's team captain Katie Zellum what she did at Manchester United, despite her being a long-time player and England international. The same team Sir Jim congratulated in May last year for their grit, determination, and team spirit, he could not recognise the captain of that team, which honestly is just hilarious. You know when you meet someone and you don't remember their name, that's bad, but he literally didn't even know who she was. There's 101 ways to style this out, but asking the captain of a women's team what they do at your club is genuinely ridiculous. I'm not going to pretend like I know all, if any, female Manchester United players, but I'm not the owner of the club, and I didn't congratulate the team as though I knew what was going on. Can you imagine the awkwardness of Katie Zellum having to answer that question and her being like, I'm the captain of a women's team. It's something out of a sketch. United Stadium is a big talking point and could be one of the definitive decisions of the INEOS era. It's still up in the air when the changes, if any, will be announced, but I just thought it would be worth mentioning something positive that we as fans could actually look forward to regarding the club right now. So Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS would prefer to move United to a new stadium, the cost of which would equate to about £2 to £2.3 billion and could take 7 years to construct. Oh, and don't even get me started on ticket prices, that's an absolute joke. So, 1 year in, what's the verdict? Are INEOS making the right changes, or are they tearing the club apart? In my opinion, INEOS are trying to do what's right for the club. Have they made mistakes along the way? Absolutely. But when you're handed a dumpster fire of a football club and you're asked to keep all the possessions inside the dumpster safe, it's kind of an impossible task. I would personally rate INEOS's first year a 6.5 out of 10. We're still yet to see the fruits of the decisions they have made, but I'm hoping we'll begin to see this at the start of next season. Recruitment has obviously been their number one priority, and I would argue, other than maybe Joshua Zirkzee, every signing they have made will complement the squad in the next 5 years. So let's wait and see. I'm just praying they give Amorim the time he needs. Otherwise, things could turn sour very quickly from a fan's perspective of INEOS. Let me know what you make of INEOS's first year in charge of the club in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe for more honestly biased sports content. But for now, Godspeed.